This is a Merrick Studios podcast.
Today's guest is Jacob York. Jacob is an entrepreneur, deal maker, and has been one of the most influential figures in the music industry. Getting his start at his family's record label, York Records, he went on to discover Junior Mafia, Gucci Mane, Cameron, and Little Kim. Jacob was also influential in New York nightlife, working with luminaries like Puff Daddy, Mark Ronson, and Jessica Rosenblum. His business expertise became so sought after that he went on to consult for major labels like Sony, Epic, RCA, Columbia, Atlantic, and Universal. Later, Jacob started Electric Republic, managing Karrueche Tran, Chantel Jeffries, and others. This is Mixed and Mastered with Jacob York. Welcome to Mixed and Mastered, the podcast where the stories of the music industry come to life. I'm Jeffrey Sledge, bringing you real conversations with the people who have shaped the sound of music. We're pulling back the curtain on what it takes to make it in the music business. These are the stories you won't hear anywhere else, told by the people who live them. This is Mixed and Mastered. Mixed and Mastered podcast. But a man I really respect,
Thank you.
who I said yesterday that he yells at me all the time, but no, he talks directly at me. But Jacob York, welcome to this podcast, bro.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you, my brother.
I really appreciate this.
Let's do this finally.
This
It took you a year and a half to get around to me. I was so far down the list.
Jesus.
You know, I was on the general admission list, so I finally made it. I paid my $10. I stood on the 2-hour line, and I finally got into the Mixed and Mastered. I feel honored.
Now you're in the door. Now
I'm in the door.
So let's start from the top. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York.
Yes, sir. Bushwick.
Tell me about it. Tell me about being born in Brooklyn and raised. How was your childhood? Tell me all about it.
Well, my childhood is very unique and can take 18 hours to speak of, but I can paraphrase it. I was born in Coney Island. Well,
Okay.
I was born at Beth Israel Hospital, but grew up Coney Island until I was 1. Then my parents moved to Bushwick. That's a whole nother theory. Big thing was going on. And what's interesting, and I know why we're getting here, is my father eventually, became like a Muslim leader, but he was also an aspiring musician. Right. And so we grew up in Bushwick, and as a Muslim leader, he obviously built a following, and, with that came capital. So by the time I came around, we were in a pretty good place as, being a privileged kid that grew up in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been surrounded by music my entire life. And so a lot of people that don't know me don't understand that I've been surrounded by music my entire life. My father had a recording studio, one inside the house, one actually he built out in because we owned real estate, a lot of real estate in Bushwick.
Gotcha.
He would build them out into these real estates. He had a live performance hall. And because he was a Muslim leader that wrote books and made cassettes and made VHSs, what he did also was he built in a studio, right? So he had an editing suite. In there he had cameras that filmed his sermons, and he would use those same cameras to film his videos and edit. And he actually made a studio commercial too at times, right? So you would have a lot of these people that would come in and use his studio from a commercial perspective, right? And then we also made our own cassettes. We produced our own merch. We made our own posters, and we had literally, between my dad and my uncle, we really had printing plants that produced our stuff. And because as his religious organization expanded into 38 different cities, he had a network, right? So then eventually he started opening up York Records, which are these record stores, right? That he would have inside, malls or, these standalone buildings. And, I remember getting my foot wet in that business, right? Like understanding the record business. Cause at one point in the late 80s, he moved me and my brother up to Liberty High because we had 1,000 acres up there that he was building out. And we opened up a record store in that small town right on Main Street, literally. It was York
Now,
Records.
how far is Liberty from the city?
Exit 99. So that's about 2 hours, a little bit over 2 hours. So he had bought up in a place called Parksville. He bought 1,000 acres as part of the religious organization. He bought like this Jewish camp, and we would go as Muslim kids up there, and we would have our summer vacation there and all of that stuff. And it was really like a camp for and everybody within his chapters would come and descend there once a year, and that would be the camp for the summer.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we were, as part of his family, and we had to be there out when the congregation left. We were still involved. It was still the family business, right? So he opened up a record store. I went to school in Liberty High for a little while, and being inside of the record store, I learned how distribution worked. People were calling me to sell me products. I was buying.
And how old are you at this time?
16, 17.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was buying for 20 stores, right? Because my father had no sense of age being this or that. That didn't really matter. It's the 80s. You started working early, right? And especially
when you running a one-stop.
We were pretty much running a one-stop, yeah. Then my older brother. My older brother was more preoccupied. He was older than me by a few years, so he was preoccupied with having his girlfriend. And I was just like, I'm going to, make sure this happens and that happens. And people are calling me, and I'm this young kid. I was always mature for my age, because people don't realize how young I am, right? Even now, like, they think I'm way older than I am. And I'm like, no. When I tell people my age, they're like, wait, you were 19 doing that? I was like, yeah, I was 19 running that label.
Wow.
I was like, get the fuck. I'm like, yeah. So, I learned a lot about business, but we used to have a lot of people come over to the house, right? Come over to the studio. Like, there was a video called Susie that's Sonic did, because Daddy-O and the light on Sonic drawing.
Some people don't like the way. No, that's Sally.
Yeah. Sally Walk, right? It's Sally, right?
Yeah, Sally, yeah.
Sally was, right?
Sally
was a groupie, but we love it too much. Right? That.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I actually edited that. Right?
Really?
Yeah. I was, because my dad had the editing suite. And so when the budgets were out, Kidar, who's my cousin, because Daddy-O joined the organization, he met Kidar. Kidar began to manage Sonic. Kidar would be like, well, my uncle has this video place, I can just go. And we had state-of-the-art video suites, because we would make our own religious videos, right? So we were, like churches have state-of-the-art, production studios, because they're filming, so we had all of that. And so I was young prodigy. So I loved building computers and doing all that. So my dad was like, why don't you just take over doing this? So I started editing a lot of our religious stuff. And that's before I ran a record store. And I ended up editing that. And I was like, man, I enjoyed doing this. So I helped to edit that. And, they obviously brought in, we did the final cuts, because, I guess Tommy Boy had no money.
Yeah.
But we would have that type of musical experience my entire life, like Africa Mamata, record, obviously his second album or third album came out on York Records,
That's
Return to
crazy.
Planet Rock, right?
Crazy.
And it was recorded in our studio. So I've always been around it. And if you look at James Ntume, you look at Kenny Gamble, who was part of the Philly organization. The people that were inside the organization from across the board, there was a lot of writers, producers, people, and then my father would harness, because he wanted to be a singer. Like, you look him up, he dropped songs and videos and album after album.
Yeah,
he had his own distribution network, right? He had a huge distribution network, and he would sell tickets, his own tickets, like the ultimate independence. And so when I emerged into the music business for another level, I had a lot of that knowledge. And people were so surprised, like, how much do you know? And I'm like, I never wanted to be like, well, my father had a record stores and he had distribution and manufacturing. And this is so when people used to tell me it costs $2 to manufacture an album, I used to be like,
no, it don't.
No, it don't. Like, I could go, we were manufacturing our own vinyl for nothing. It all depends on the gas prices at the point, right? That's all vinyl mattered to us. Like, we used to buy vinyl and press them, right? We made our own cassettes.
Wow.
Right? Physically made our own cassettes where the machine put the thing inside. So we were doing that for and I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of these.
So you had your own pressing plant.
Yes. We had our own pressing plants, our own vans, our own trucks, distributed to our own, because we were doing it for the religious
Got you.
Part of it, right? So we had organizations as far as London. So those guys would come in, and they would come in and they would be like, we need our stuff for London. And we would have to get their packages together and get it out to them. These are books. These are cassettes. These are VHSs. These are vinyl. These are posters. These are all of these different things. That's what we were producing. So we were doing that on that level. So what's the difference? So if my guy decides to get Jason,
it's a different product, but it's the same thing.
It's just a different product. Mm-hmm. And so when I started emerging, that's why everybody that I talked to always didn't understand why I kept forcing independence on them. Because when I looked at the numbers that were being charged by these major labels, I was like, that's not what this stuff costs. This stuff is way cheaper to do. And that's when I realized, I was like, damn, like these guys are really getting taken advantage of by these majors, because we can press our own. And then when they introduced the CD, I was like, oh, this is where they're going to find the margins, right? Because they cannot possibly tell me a cassette would cost us like 3 cents per cassette.
Wow.
And we weren't, and so I got to imagine these guys that are producing millions of them is getting it for a fraction of we were producing maybe 5,000 to 10,000 at a time. And it was costing us 3 cents.
The majors are doing millions.
Because it all depends on, most of what we have to deal with oil prices, right? Like if oil prices went up, vinyl is made from petroleum, a lot of petroleum driven. So if those prices went up, we'd be like, well, now it's 3 cents versus 4 cents. So those things were our factors, because we actually had the big machines, right? We had warehouses with all the machines in it. And because it was a religious organization, staffing was pretty much, there was no labor cost, right?
Yeah.
We had no labor costs, right? So we would be able to produce things for way cheaper. We were a nonprofit organization. So, we had, but still, even if you put it at that, it wasn't $1 they kept saying, or $2 a product. So I learned a lot having that access, right?
Gotcha.
And being around those people my whole life, and, my dad's relationships within the industry, and even, down to the Hudlin brothers and him helping to finance their first movies. And
wait. I got to, I'm about to take, I'm in the fear of taking this thing a little bit off tangent. I got a question, but before that, I've always, the movie Strictly Business, God bless Andre Harrell, who produced that movie rather. Halle Berry's first role. I always thought, and you might be able to clear this up for me, that the Hudlin brothers in that movie were based on Charles and Bo Huggins. Is that true, or do you even know? Because they were very similar. I was like, is that true? Is that based on?
I have no idea.
I just
know that. I just remember Reginald Hudlin coming to my dad's studio upstate and him giving him cash to finish the movie.
Wow.
That's all I remember. Like, I don't remember. I was too young to understand nuances of it. Yeah. So I just looked and I was like, yeah, we're putting up money with these guys for their movie.
And now Reggie's a dime.
I ran into Reggie years later. We hooked up, kicked it, and he was like, yeah, what's up? And we talked about it.
That's funny. So real quick, I'll ask you one question about comeback. So what you were talking about, the cassettes and stuff like that. Do you think that margin, like you said, the 3 cents to make them and sell them for what at that time, I guess $15.99 or whatever it was. Do you think that was causing this insurgence of vinyl and cassettes now, is because the margins, and they're trying to inject money into the business?
I think yes, but I also think that they are realizing, I think what we saw in the last 10 years, 12 years in the streaming business is a group of people that wanted to remove brown people from the equation. And why do I say that? I think they thought they can program the general audience that consumes our content, right? And force them to buy without us, right? Why do I say that? Because I've had conversations back then with non-Black people who would say, you don't need this, you don't need this. We can, with playlists, we can make these people like what we want them to like, right? So I think there was a giant coup to remove you, me, and the rest of us out of the equation. They knew that 80% of it was purchased by white kids, but they felt like they didn't need our stamp to do it. And they had a group of people that they had programmed on dopamine, right? They had them doped up, right? Where these kids were like going viral, many followers, top streams, this, that. It was like they triggered the dopamine in this new generation. And so they were like, we've gamified music, so we don't need music executives that are not white. We need digital people, and we need bankers, and we need this. And we finally figured out how to eliminate the culture. And they started with these playlists in which they had no skip button. Remember, there was a playlist. If you listened to it for free, you couldn't skip the song. And that's where it began, right? Where it was like, okay, the kids had to listen to whatever we fed them. And then eventually, like I told these guys, I said, you can never make kids like what they don't like. I think the jig is up. Why do I say that? Because the big five at the time funded Spotify, right? There's got to be something illegal about the record company funding the record store.
Dude.
That was not a thing back in the day.
We're gonna have we'll have that part of the conversation offline, because Offline.
Okay, cool. And so there's something wrong about that, right?
Yes,
Because back in the days,
yes.
Tower Records was not funded by Sony Music, right?
Exactly.
There was
Records was not funded by Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
It was like,
yes, Warner Brothers wasn't funding, Coconuts. Warehouse was being funded by BMG. Like that would be, now they paid for price and positioning, but the area that maintains a sense of integrity with it. Now they funded the biggest entity, right? But here's what happened. Eventually Spotify's reach diminished. And as you can tell, hip hop is predominantly purchased by, when you look at hip hop and R&B, it's predominantly purchased by Apple, right? Yes. So Spotify's reach diminished. And so now all of a sudden with Apple, Amazon, and all these other people that the labels don't control, you now have this thing where they don't have they had the skip button. They had different things that they implemented, and then the jig was up. The labels could no longer control what streams. And I said this in another podcast. I said one of the biggest things that we see today is now vinyl never stopped selling. That's the weird part about it. It never stopped selling. It's just that the artist that they propped up just was not transferring to vinyl sales. Right. It was not. They would be like, this is the biggest artist in the world. And it's like, but they can't sell merch, vinyl, or nothing. That doesn't make sense. Like you and I know when we were younger and Michael Jackson I had the red leather jacket and the penny loafers.
You had the t-shirt, you had the hat, you had the glasses, you
saw the elite
gloves. You had it all.
Gloves, grown ass people in the hood was walking around Michael Jackson glove and Jerry curls. Absolutely. You can tell the immediate impact of his being the biggest artist in the world. These other guys, they were propping up because they were propping them up through streams. You could tell that they were not quite what people said they were, right? And so I think that became a big factor. So then all of a sudden you have the kids started saying, I don't want to listen to 50 songs I don't want to hear just to hear the song I want to hear. So they began to go outside of that. And you had companies like Victorola and all of them start bringing back these vinyl players that were cheaper and more durable. And the kids discovered this thing called vinyl. It became something cool to do. And they started purchasing music they wanted to hear. Because guess what? If I didn't want to hear a song, I wasn't forced to pay for it.
True.
But if I'm not allowed to skip on stream, I just paid for a song I did not want to hear. And that's what they did to kids. So kids were stuck listening to 15 songs from Little Xan to Little Blah before they got to the Drake record, right? And that was corporate America forcing what made sense to VCs onto kids. It got them the profit share because Little Blah and Little Clah and Little Z and Little Flea were a bunch of non-Black people from Midwest cosplaying as emo rappers and everything else, right? And had these guys pumping out this music, and all of a sudden, Black kids were like, I don't want to hear this shit. So then they started shifting back to radio. Right? All of a sudden, radio had a resurgence, right? Because it was free. I didn't need data, right? And I knew that Flex was going to play whatever I wanted to hear, right? I wasn't forced. And if I want to turn off, I can just move away from that and go here, right? But at the end of the day, they started shifting away from Spotify because Spotify was just so demanding of their, it was like almost like, you're nothing if you don't allow us to do this to you. Right. Yeah. And that's the same thing was, and we've seen this with social media and everything else. It just became so intrusive into their lives. So no, I don't think the labels would choose to put vinyl back out because vinyl has a cost.
Yeah, it does.
Right?
It does.
There's a cost to it.
A cost that you can't go around.
You can't go around.
It is what it is. It is what it is. Mm-hmm.
Today, if I put a song on stream, it costs me nothing. It costs the labels nothing to put a song on stream and take it down.
Yeah,
nothing. Right?
Yeah.
So, but vinyl they have to actually call the record plant, print them up. And because it's not a widely available thing, it's not as cheap as it used to be. Right? Trying to get cassettes and CDs pressed up is not as cheap as they used to be because it's not as available as it used to be. And so like when you have a company like BMG using Universal Music to press up its physicals, that tells you where we are in 2025, 26, right? BMG has a deal with Universal. When BMG had one of the biggest manufacturing plants on the planet, they now use Universal to manufacture their physicals.
Wow.
Right? So, because it's not as ready. Those things got thrown away. Those massive record plants.
I know. A lot of those 2-inch tapes got thrown away.
It's like they don't have any
garbage, like in the trash.
They're in the trash. They dismantled full manufacturing facilities, fired people. So you have very limited places that can manufacture. So the cost is higher. So believe me, If they didn't have to, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Right? They will continue the streaming because streaming is where their power is.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think it's intentional for a margin of finances, because you got to realize Sony makes money as an investor in Spotify on that end and makes money a piece of your streams. So they make money twice. They don't do that with
double dipping. Yeah, they're double dipping. Yeah.
They double dipping.
All of them are, not to single out Sony. All of them are doing that.
Yeah, they're all doing it. I'm just saying all labels are doing that. They're all making money. So they're not going to say, well, let me go to vinyl where I have to press it up, distribute it, physical. They not have to hire people. You can't AI vinyls into a store.
No, you
right?
can't.
Somebody has to pick it up, ship it. It has to go out. Someone has to manage those shipments. So they're back hiring staff, physical people.
Trucks.
So no.
Got trucks again. You know what I'm saying?
They got trucks again. They got a contract with UPS. They got a contract with DHL. They have to go right back to that. They do not want that. What they are is giant banks that are looking to make their VCs that put up money for them 10%, 20% return on their money every year. And that matters with market share. And market share is what percentage of the market you own at the end of the year from how many records went through a system that you own. That's all. So in other words, the streams, if you represent 37% of the streams for the year, you have 30% of the market share. Your stocks go up. You pay dividends to your board. You pay returns, and you rinse
bonuses and
bonuses and rinse and repeat. It's a synthetic number that they care about. It doesn't have anything to do with profits, loss. It's all about market share. What percentage of the market you own? And if your stock is at $10, because you own 37% of the market, your stock jumps to $15. Now, all of a sudden, in the volume that you have, that's an extra $500 million you can pay as a return to your investors, charge down whatever debt, loans you have, and pay yourself a bonus. That's the idea for the music business now.
Let's skip forward a little bit. So, correct me if I'm chronologically wrong. Your first kind of foray, well, your second, you started is your family business. Your second foray was through JYP, right? The Jacob York production. Okay, so
my first foray was obviously,
with your
working with my family business, right? The second foray, where yes, you're correct to an extent. It wasn't called Jacob York Presents. It was called To York at that time. And I started producing events in New York.
Yes. That's what I wanted to
I started doing marketing and producing events in New York, working with the Palladium, Tunnel, me and Jessica together as partners. Started Speed. We bought roller skating back to the Roxy. We did Carbon. We, really, the white parties in the Hamptons, a lot of different things that we worked together on. And, and that was the thing I was doing, but I was doing that while still, doing music. But
I want to talk about that a little bit because, for those, as I do this podcast, I always try to teach people. So in New York, this obviously a different time now, but in New York, in that era, those events that you and Jessica were doing were cultural moments. There were constantly cultural moments. They were pushing the line. You were getting obviously the music crowd, but then you guys were also attracting actors and actresses and models and the upper echelon of New York, and their kids were coming through, like the guy who run Morgan Stanley's kids or whatever. Like, so tell me about that, how you developed that what's the word I'm looking for? Those events to attract those people. Cause again, it was such a cross bridge of people.
Pollination.
Yeah, exactly.
Part of it was a moment in time in New York City, right? Hip hop's growth and commercial success was very important because you remember there was a time that when they discovered, I think it was late 80s, that the majority, when they remember, I think it was Time Magazine or Newsweek did the face of hip hop, and it was a white kid with a hoodie on. And they showed that hip hop was consumed predominantly by white people, right? Now, all of a sudden, you have this slow merger. And I tell people this all, Jessica Rosenblum played the main role in bridging downtown and hip hop. And when I mean by that, people are very comfortable that they can go downtown to Soho and be in a party. And they don't realize that did not exist. In my time in New York, that didn't exist
at all.
She took the Run DMC guy, Russell, when she was the door lady at Nell's, and said, let me show you what the downtown crowd is. Let me show you what the non-Queens crowd, because Russell, Diddy, Andre, all of the people that she single-handed, even myself, I was a little different because I was privileged. They didn't come from privilege. So, what bridge and tunnel people. They were coming to some kind of bridge or tunnel. Either they were coming down from the Bronx, or they were coming from Queens, or they were coming across the Brooklyn Bridge. They were bridge and tunnel crowds, and bridge and tunnel crowd was like, yuck. So if you were coming through the Holland Tunnel, you were coming from New Jersey, it was like,
you look down upon. It was like, ugh. Yeah.
If you partied uptown, it was like, ugh, right? You had to be part of a downtown hit scene. But the difference that people don't understand is, if you were seen at the right club, the clout you got from that was incredible, right? There was a time that the party you showed up at defined your brand inside that city. People were begging, because when I had the access to these parties, right? When I was doing these parties, you know how many managers, agents, publicists were calling me saying, I need my artist inside that party. People said, how did you meet all these people? Because they wanted to be at my parties. They wanted to be at our parties, because if you came to Lot 61 on a Monday, Lot 61 was a party that was produced by the New Shit. Do you know who the New Shit was? The New Shit was Jusky and Richie.
Jusky. Wow.
Jusky and Richie. Wow. The New Shit was Mark Ronson and Samantha, right? And Noah was behind it. Jessica. A few times we did it together. But Jusky and Richie went on to start a place called One Oak.
Mm-hmm.
Noah went on to start something called Tao. Mark Ronson went on to become a big
Grammy Award.
These are the people throwing parties on a Monday night at a lot, and Lot 61 was the actual lot and plot number, right? So it's just when you walked into Lot 61, there was no VIP section.
No,
you were in the VIP section. It looked like a library.
If you got in that club, you were a VIP.
And guess what? Money couldn't buy you in it.
No,
because real money was there. Rothschilds was sitting in there.
I was always fortunate to have a good relationship with Jessica, and she was that, because I've seen her brick so many people at that door, viciously, wow.
Yes. But people don't understand why.
And we'll be right back.
I'm Bun B. I'm a host and a co-owner at Merrick Studios, and we just took things to the next level. Merrick Studios Plus is live, so tap in at wearemerrickstudios.com. Get 65% off, and don't just listen, be a part of the show.
Master the art of lyricism with Pendulum Mink, the first school for rap. Learn elite techniques through immersive lessons, real-world exercises, and guidance from hip-hop icons. This is where MCs sharpen their skills and glow boldly on the mic. Ready to level up? Visit pendulummink.com and start your journey today.
And now, back to the show.
Well, tell me why.
Holding a party is curating. It's an art form. You are curating an experience for the people in that room, right? So you are providing for them. They didn't come there so that they could be taking pictures of shit. They came there to express themselves, to feel a certain way, to dance, to enjoy themselves. And what people don't understand, as a promoter, that's your job, to curate that experience. See, promoters became, I just have to maximize the money. See, when you have 17 billionaires in the room and 19, I'm talking about society.
Real shit, like you said, like Rothschilds,
the Oscars,
some real shit.
Yes, real money. You're not thinking I'm letting them in because they're an actor. You're looking at them and saying, okay, you're kind of cool and trendy. We like what you're going to bring to the room. Let me let you in. Oh, wow. It didn't matter how rich, poor, nothing. When the athlete from Cincinnati show up and said, I got the money, we would be like, okay, move, please. Ill. You understand? Go away. You don't look good.
You're not on the list, man. Could you move to the side?
Can you move to the side? Okay, you look good. Well, how is they better than me? Can you see how they can dress? Like, look at the way you're wearing. You're wearing like some FUBU outfit with your, with Timbs and your shit's up to your knees. Like, come on, move out of the way. But I'm the New York bitch. It's like, we don't care who you are. We care about how cool you are. There's a big difference. We're curating a sound. We can we wrote out the DJ sets down to the second. We can sit here and hear. We can look at a room and say, who's fucking up the sound? Wait, somebody get on top of the DJ. Tell them, I need this song played at this moment and this song played at this. That's the key to curating, and it's an art form.
Yeah.
And people don't understand that. They think it's just maximizing, and this is why parties are dead now. And people are like, why are clubs? No, because you guys implied the VC methodology to parties. Maximize returns. No real programming, no real investment. I take artists, I put artists on flyer, I pay for radio, I do this, I do that, and do this, and now I make money. I walked out with $100,000. Now, that might seem cool to you, but how long do you think that's sustainable before? And when, before it dies?
It's not
You gave people no experience. When someone walked out of our parties, they felt like they left church.
Yeah.
They got a revival out of it. Oh, I enjoyed myself.
You guys
so
parties,
fun.
you guys parties were the kind of parties where, because they usually during the week it would be like a Tuesday or something. They would never be on a Saturday. It would be like a one day night, like instead of two. Yeah. And then the next day you go to the office, sit my tape, go to the record company, jive, and you talk about the party all day.
All day, yeah.
Next day, yo, bro. Last night was crazy.
It was crazy.
Yeah. You talk about it all day.
You don't know how much people don't know the hours and days me and Jessica would be sitting there losing our minds. We would be sitting there with flyers, putting them into sleeves, getting them out, designing them to the T, making sure the party was more. This is a cool name. Like I remember when we launched roller skating on the wrist at the Roxy's on Tuesdays, right?
Let's talk about it.
And we did the roller skating at the Roxy's, and I was like, Jermaine is my boy, and I'm like, I want to help promote his music in New York, and I'm trying to figure out how to help him. Like, let's bring him in.
Jermaine Dupri.
Jermaine Dupri, yeah. And he had the album going, but our thing was never really booking artists to perform. That just was not our thing, right? Our thing was our audience, our artists was our patrons, right? Like it was important to elevate them, not really create a hierarchy of that's this person, that person, right? So, Jessica was like, what if we just have him DJ? Because he can DJ, right? And I was like, yes, he can DJ. So his album release party at Roller Skating at the Roxy's was him DJ. He had not DJ'd, from my knowledge, a professional event like that ever before. Because he always says, you started me off DJ.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And I remember he came up there and he was DJing and he started trying to play music. And I remember telling Coup, you got to tell him what to play.
Yeah, because he's from Atlanta. He didn't know the New York scene.
So he's playing the wrong parts of the record.
Yeah.
And Cool's like, no. People like DMX's version on Pull It. No, this is really to this. And I'm watching this happen. And I think the Clue and Flex is over Jermaine's back telling him what to play. But that was how we operated, right? We made sure he's playing the right shit. And that was big for him because that was remember Tuesdays was album release day.
Yeah.
And it helped him,
the records came out on Tuesdays.
People left roller skating at the Roxy's and said, man, Jermaine had it rocking last night.
Yeah, man.
Right? We loved it. And it buzzed him up in New York City. People in New York was talking about it. It was a week of his album. I remember Michael Molden calling me and saying, thank you so much. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't about money. He wasn't like, pay me to do it. He was like, we need to be a part of your dope events. Yeah. Right? What you and Jessica is doing in New York City, we got to be a part. Right? Yeah. It's that concept. And I feel like the death of it came because two things happened. Promoters got replaced. Right? And I know Flex is going to be angry at me for saying this, but once Jessica was moved out of the tunnel and Lighty is out of the tunnel, the promoters are out of the tunnel, Flex takes over. Flex is not a promoter. He's a DJ.
Some promoters is DJ. He's not a promoter.
And so while he became the brand of the tunnel, people did not understand that there were things we would not allow, our DJs to do. The tunnel never said free all night. The tunnel was not built on artists. These clubs were not built on the artists. The artists wanted to be there because it was the place to be.
It was the place to be on a Sunday night.
That's what important.
You had to be there.
You had to be there.
Yeah.
And now it's built on that. People did not come because Biggie was on the flyer. Biggie came because he knew people were going to be at the tunnel because the tunnel was that place to be. Right? Like if you were not at the tunnel on Sunday, you were nobody.
Played yourself.
Right? So Biggie came for that. Like you got to realize the tunnel had no VIP sections for you to sit in. You stood at the bar.
There was the bar.
You stood at the bar. There was a bucket that was chained to the goddamn bar because we didn't want you to use it as a weapon, and you bought a drink, right? Yep. And that was the tunnel, right?
That was it.
That was how it worked, right?
And people would just walk around all night, walk through there and see, because it was like, was almost like an art. It was almost. I know we going off. It was almost like an art installment. It was because when you would walk through, you see somebody something different every time. It could be the crazy niggas from Brooklyn over there, and the bad chicks from Queens over there, and like, oh shit, there go Onyx, and you could do another loop and see a totally different people,
group of people. And you know what I always told people? This is probably on a tangent. Most of you didn't realize the bathroom in the tunnel was unisex.
Yeah, a lot
of people forget that, and there was no assaults. Like it was like we just shared bathroom with women. We just excuse me, and go over there and pee. The girl went in there. Like it was a unisex bathroom. Yep. Nobody really. Was nothing. Remember, you go upstairs with the bathroom was everybody used the same bathroom, but the tunnel on Saturday was the biggest techno party, right? So Sunday was the place that Jessica was able to get in to get that because they felt like Sunday was a not so desirable night. For a party. It was Fridays and Saturdays and did during the week. Bridge and Tunnel and people partied Fridays and Saturdays.
So they had to go to work on Monday, so Sunday night they didn't party.
No one partied Sunday. So when Jessica came up with the idea to do Tunnel on Sunday, it was because, Peter Gation just felt like nobody wants a Sunday. It ended up becoming one of their biggest nights because you got to think Tunnel during the era when Stressica, Chris Lighty, that era, was the average person paid $40 a head general admission and never asked a question. And 3,000 people showed up every single week.
Every Sunday. Without
no major artist, So when Flex took over, it became like the Wu-Tang album release party, all ladies free, da-da-da-da. That type of marketing is not a promoter's marketing.
Yeah.
A promoter would have known never do that because when you give away the building, you diminish the building.
Yeah. Yeah,
because
now it's like anybody can get in. Now anybody can get in.
You have to make people feel like it's somewhere special to be. And that's what happened to parties. Non-promoters took over, right? And they started promoting it like it was a fire sale. Like you will never see Hermes say, we have a free sale.
No.
That's a Walmart
Louis Vuitton don't have sales.
They don't have free sales. That's not what they do. That's what Walmart does. That's what Target does. Mm-hmm. Things that are for the general public can run that type of marketing. If you're running a party and you wanted to create exclusive, the Tunnel has made $1 million in one night and never promoted an artist. Mm. Right? We have done extraordinary numbers in our party you wouldn't believe without having one artist on a flyer.
Yeah.
Right? And as a guy that's gone into the put artists on the flyer party scene too, the numbers were better and the margins were better because people don't seem to understand when you put an artist on the flyer, you have to pay their rate. So if you're giving Diddy 100,000 and then you're giving radio 25, right? And then now you have to do a bar guarantee for $20,000. Now you'll put out a flyer. Because you gave Diddy $100,000, you're putting massive marketing. And let's say the door general, you spend $180,000 between security, this, that, and you make $300,000. Your profit is $120,000, right? Now, if you didn't give Diddy shit, and you made $200,000, your profit is $190,000.
Yeah.
What's the difference? Yeah. Less Maylocks, not stressing that you're chasing this big nut.
Yeah.
Right? You're chasing this huge nut to get back your money. Yeah, and that was the problem with it. It was just, so at the end of and we had, not only did we throw money, we had brands, clothing brands sponsoring us because they wanted to be a part of it. The people, like when we did our parties, we meshed the world. Not only was there like I remember when we first started Speed, and my friend Steve Stout, funny guy, right? He knew our parties were that important, right? So one day he's hanging out. I guess Columbia had did a deal, or Tommy had did a deal for a album for Joe Pesci as the character My Cousin Vic, right? It's
really? I didn't know that.
Like an audio album. Like it was supposed to be a singer.
Okay.
And so Steve was Tommy's guy. He was one of Tommy's guys. Corey was two. We'll get to that whole concept. One black guy per white person. But anyway, he was Tommy's guy. And so he was charged with, helping to market Joe Pesci. So he called. Like, hey, I need to market him. I got to make sure it's the right events. Oh, cool. And Steve didn't know. I wouldn't have said bring Joe Pesci to Speed. I was like, I'm going to run him to some things this week. He said he comes because I invited him to Speed. He brings Joe Pesci to Speed.
Wow.
So Joe Pesci is sitting in Speed. This is like a prime. This is My Cousin Vinny. The whole, he's sitting in Speed and people are walking up like, I'm talking about, this is the wildest shit. Cause hood niggas is funny.
Yeah.
I'm talking about gangsters from Brooklyn that people rap about.
Them
right?
dudes.
I'm talking about the real dudes were walking out, seeing Joe Pesci going, turning into K-pop fans. It was
fanning out.
wild.
Fanning
I
out.
have never seen this shit in my life. I'm talking about guys like, I'm talking about the guys that people rap about that back in the days, right? That are in jail for 500 years. But when I say they folded when they saw Joe Pesci.
Wow.
Right? I'm talking about folded, like, oh, Joe Pesci. And he's like, am I at the right place? I'm like, you're at the right place. And so this is how that was our events. Just so you know, Joe Pesci walking into, Speed on a Thursday, right? And it's just the straightest
mad love from all the most gangster dudes ever.
The most gangster dudes, Timbs and jeans, Mobb Deep, shook ones in the background of Joe Pesci.
Absolutely,
what's up? Right?
Absolutely.
That was parties, right? Because that's understanding what a party represents, right? And you know what happened the next day? By Wednesday morning, everybody was on the streets was talking about, yo, Joe Pesci pulled up at Speed. He a real G. It's not just a movie, right? He was there. And I always called Steve and I said, even though it was a mistake by Steve, I always I love you. I will always love you for that. That was actually dope.
Wow. Right? I want to do something. I'm going to give you a couple people that you've worked with and just give me your story. So let's start with Cameron.
Yes.
You discovered Cam and
I want to be clear. Big was the one that discovered.
Biggie discovered Cam.
Yeah.
And brought him to Undeas.
No. Mm-mm.
So tell me, I'm getting it wrong.
Well, yes, technically he brought him to Undeas, but Big had passed away by the time we had signed him.
Gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha.
So what it was Big was bought Mace. And Mace and Cam were in a group called Children of the
Corn. Mm-hmm.
So I saw Mace, but I never saw Cam. Right? But apparently Big knew about Cam and Mace and all of that. Right? And so Big was trying to figure out, by the way, Big was an owner in Undeas, which was our Atlantic deal through Big Beat Atlantic. That deal where Junior Mafia, Little Kim was signed was called Undeas, which started as a company called Unideas. When we tried to create a marketing brand, we were trying to create a marketing firm because that's my specialty is brand and marketing.
Gotcha.
So that's where Undeas comes from. It stands for Unideas. Obviously, he made it about his ideas, but that didn't matter to us.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I transferred it into a label, right? Because apparently, as we were trying to share a lot of ideas with people, they were getting shot down, right? Big would accept them. So we were like, you know what? Let's just sign an artist. And the artist that we signed to Undeas was Junior Mafia. But back to Cam. Big bought Cam through Mace.
Gotcha.
And so what ended up happening was Mace, Coup does a deal with Bad Boy and signs Mace to Bad Boy. Right? Which was not what Big wanted, right? Big realized that what I realized in his logic in some of our conversation is that while he was working with C's, writing for C's, he found that because C's had a lisp and he had a slow draw, that a lot of times C's could not really, it was a challenge to get C's to rap big lyrics.
Gotcha.
At the time. And so when he saw Mace, because Mace had that same simplified drawl, it was like Mace can write and reference C's records. So our introduction to Mace was paying Mace to write 6 songs for C's album. One of them being Crush on You, right? So Crush on You was a song that Mace wrote for C's album, right? So that's where that came from. And then Mace goes and signs to Diddy. And when Big passed, we're up, myself, Lance, and a couple of us are up in Harlem for, I think, a Biggie tribute video that I think the Lox was doing.
Okay. And
I'm standing there, Lance is standing there, and Jim Jones walks over, introduces himself to Un, and says, hey, Lance, hey, Un, I'm Jim Jones. This is the artist Cameron that Biggie wanted to sign.
Wow.
Un apparently remembers this conversation. It's like, I remember him mentioning you. We're closing, we just closed a new deal, which was our entertainment deal at Epic Records, right? We were having a hard time because C's solo album was supposed to go through there.
Go through that.
Apparently he was trying to stay at Atlantic. And there was this whole big movement there. Craig Kalman, I won't put you in jail. He's a sly cat, right? That guy is not the most straight shooter. He was playing this dark game with Diddy And because Miss Wallace had an ownership in Undeas, because of Biggie's ownership in Undeas when he passed, she kind of sided with Craig and, and Wayne and all of those guys and Diddy and all those guys against us. So we didn't end up signing C's to Entertainment. So we ended up signing Cam as the first artist to Entertainment, because when C started, whatever was happening with Steve's, and a lot of that stuff, that cultural stuff was more undealing with that stuff. Like I just, as the president of the company, my mental state was basically getting the deals done, A&R the records, marketing the records, making sure like I didn't really, I'm in, the hood beefs and this, like that stuff was to me just silly, because we're all black people. And hood beef means what? None of us own, with Rockefeller Center. So what do we hood beef? Right. So that's where that came from. So Cam ended up being the first artist signed to Entertainment, which was really us trying to prove that post Biggie, we can deliver artists. Because people always believed that the entire thing was based on Biggie because Junior Mafia. Right. But they don't know that a lot of people outside of the industry and a lot of the corporate white guys don't understand the process. You're an A&R, so you understand the process, right? They don't understand the process of making music. Right. And so they thought that, okay, Biggie just rapped on it. And people like, yes, he can hop up. He said Junior Mafia and the hype was there. But Conspiracy was not a 5 mic album. You know what I'm saying? Like, it took a lot of work. It took Clark Kent bringing him in to help. It took a lot of producers. It took a lot of A&R. It took a lot, I'm talking about late nights trying to get these guys that were not really rappers to rap. Little Kim was a rapper. Clef was a rapper. Trife was a rapper. You know what I'm saying? But C's, Nino, those guys were not real rappers. So it was like, and then all of a sudden Diddy introduced the Locks at a certain point. So now Biggie is really stressed out. He's making Junior Mafia album. He's hearing 3 versions of him in the Locks coming out on Bad Boy. And he's like, yeah, that's Diddy's group. Listening to my group. So he's in the studio panicking. We're having to maintain his control and keeping him focused, because he's like, this is what they're doing. And look what I have, so that first album fell on me and Clark Kent to kind of bring home Junior Mafia Conspiracy, right? The ideas were there. Big showed up what he needed to do. Made sure Big was compensated for writing what he writes. And again, when I tell people this all the time, they don't want to believe me, but on Players Anthem, Big did not write for anyone but C's. Kim's verse was written by Kim.
Yeah, you told me that, and I was admittedly was shocked. I was shocked. I thought that Big wrote most of that.
No, Big did not write the most of Conspiracy. He wrote for C's on Conspiracy. That's who Big wrote for. He wrote for C's. Clef wrote for himself. The Snakes wrote for themselves. Kim wrote for herself. I think on Get Money, he helped with, like, if you listen, you're an A&R, right? So listen to Get Money, right? And you can hear where he played his role and where Kim, right? Because when Big would give Kim reference points or write, quick things, she never delivered it the way she delivered her writing.
She felt her shit from the heart.
But where Big played a role was the hook. Fuck bitches, get money. 100% Big, right? Biggie, when Kim did Get Money, she heard it different. Kim would more come off like a backpacker rapper.
Really?
Yes. So when she heard Get Money, she was, and I'm sitting on the table, hands on the Glock. I got catfish in the hash, sugar dash, and now on top of me the blast time. I see angels in the sky. That was the original verse she did. She was on a completely different part of the beat. She was on the 1 and 3. Like, she was not. Big said, nah, I don't like that verse. I think we should go this way with it. And then he did his verse, right? So then she had to mimic, I'm going to take it on my knee, baby. When she gets out of that, you want to kiss me on my knees, baby, and she jumps to the other part, listen to how different the flow sounds. She starts roasting the record. And he always says, every time I try to write something, she never delivers it right. I'm like, she's not one of those artists you need to write for. She's one of those artists you need to help. Do you understand? Yeah. Like, it's very, Kim had a hard time delivering records people wrote, right? She would be like, nah, let me get this, that. So a lot of people don't understand that he played no role in her writing really on that album. Like, it wasn't true. Like, people believe that. Now, there's been songs that he helped her with, but like I tell people all the time, if you're an A&R, if that's the purity test you want to run to, then I help Big write. You understand my point? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I can tell you times and shrimp a la carte and bitches from Brussels, man, clams and mussels, that was given to him by me. Does that mean I wrote the record?
Yeah.
right? In the creative process, different people contribute. Jay-Z has people that given him writing skill.
Everybody does.
I mean, everybody does. So when you have this a lot, but it seems like when it comes to female rap, it's amplified as if they're not allowed to have help.
Like they're puppets. Right?
Yeah, they're supposed to like only be the only ones that write every single verse from top to bottom. Let's be clear. Michael Jackson didn't write every single verse from top to bottom. No one does. Everybody in the creative process has a team around them that comes up with hooks, ideas. Nah, you should say this or say that.
Say it that
like
way,
when people say
that way or
Mace,
whatever, yeah.
When people say Mace wrote Kim's verse on Crush on You, I go, no, he did not. No, he did not. Do you understand that? Like, I was the A&R. I'm telling you, no, he did not. Kim wrote her verse on Crush on You. Mace wrote for C's on Crush on You, right? It's like, I can tell you a song where Jay-Z wrote some lyrics for Kim. And you'll be able to tell. You remember the what?
Yeah, of course.
You remember the original, right?
I don't know if I remember the original.
The original was the one I dropped on Clue's tape. Where she was like, if they had twins, she'd probably have two pops. This all nigga was. Pussy greens up. She just fake, right? And Big was like, I don't know if that came out or not. I remember Clue tapes had one version, right? I don't know if he took it out before or not, right? But I remember Big was like, she can't diss my wife, right? So we ended up removing that, right? And that verse became the verse that Jay-Z was put on, right? In the middle. But the way he flowed 17 bars. So he threw the record off. She did her verses already. And she wasn't willing to come back because she really didn't really want him on the record, right? Right? Because that was a song. Remember, Big's on the hook. That Big does the hook. C's ended up replacing Big on the hook, but Big does the hook. Hey, she didn't want him on the record. We kind of just put Jay-Z on the record. Right? Just so I Big can on the studio with me. But he throws the record off. He throws the bars off. So then what he has to do, that whole, when you get on my knees, I'm a disease. See, if you listen to that, that's the part of the what that Jay-Z wrote. Those 3 bars to fix the problem that he created on the record. But then when you go after that, you hear him go, saw nigga what, pussy greased up. That's Kim's writing. So you can tell the difference between what he wrote and what she wrote on that record.
Yeah. So wait, right? When you met Kim, I'm assuming you met Kim just in Brooklyn, like before the music shit, just from around the way.
She's sister Thais introduced us.
Got you. Did she have the star quality from the gate?
From gate. See, so I lived in 226 St. James. 224 St. James, 2R. Big lived in 226 St. James, right? So we were neighbors, right? So, it's nowadays you come outside, there's a stoop. So, what we did back then, we hang out on stoops.
Yeah, stand outside the front of the building.
That was our court, right? And so one day Thais is walking by. She's like, I want to introduce you to this girl, Kim, who can rap, right? And I know you're in the music business. And I was in the party music business before I got with Big in them, right? So they were like, yeah, I know you're the music guy in the neighborhood. This is when Big was making Ready to Die. He was trying to do that. And I was like, oh, okay. And so she comes and she brings Kim, and Kim's flows. Remember, she had these spandex on. She had like a halter top. She had like a little hat on her head that was looked like a little beanie or whatever it was. And she starts rapping, and she has this deep baritone, and she's, and I'm like, she sounded like Sledge at the time. She was up.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow. So I said, Big, yo, you got to listen to this girl. Y'all got to listen to her. And I was like, at the time, unwanted to be in the music business. And he had asked me to help him learn the music business. So I'm like, yo, let's get together. Yo, this one is the one. Okay. Right. And she had that, and she had just the way she just commanded you, even standing on St. James rapping for me or standing anywhere. She acted like it was a show. And I was like, yo, this girl is a star. Wow. Right. But Big, to be truthful, and something nobody did, Big did not like the deep baritone that Kim used.
Really?
He wanted her to sound girly. He did not like that. He wanted her to be dainty, and I don't like when she sounds like that, like a dude. I like her when she sounds like this. So he always pushed her to do these dainty things, but Kim was, yeah, well, that was Kim. But Big wanted her to be like, nah, I want her to rap about this. I want her to rap about that. I want her to talk about this. That was where hindsight being 2020, yes, she ushered in the era of, femininity to hip hop, right? Because before that, a lot of female rappers were very mask presenting and mask sounding. Because it was misogyny. You had to sound like a male, right? To be believable. So he was like, nah, I want her to sound like dainty. Because I remember Roxanne Shante, and I think it was, the real Roxanne, and I remember this and I remember that, but at the time, guess who was out? MC Light was out. Queen Latifah's out. Boss is coming out.
Boss,
Everybody was, that was the sound at the time. And I remember him like, nah, I think she should sound more like, see, I saw Pepper be on some girly shit. I want her to be on some girly shit. But he was right? Image wise and sound wise. But I always felt like that robbed him of just like what made her. So I tried to, when we were making hardcore, I was pushing her to give me that baritone. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear that. Like, I wanted to hear her, because when me and Kim recorded, it'd be like all lights off and just be us in the studio. And it got really dark. It got really dark a lot of times in the studio. It got real dark, a lot of crime, depression. We would just be in there in the dark. Remember how the knees boards had that orangish glow? That would be the base of our lights.
Wow.
And she'll be in the vocal booth, and I'd be right there by the board. And she would just be like talking. She liked reverb on her voice, and she'll be talking in like some reverb voice. And it was just like, that was the process of making hardcore. And the reason why Crush on You ended up on hardcore, which people don't know, is because, interestingly enough, Kim stopped recording. She got to about 8 songs, and the toxicity between her and Big and what she was going through, depression, pregnancy, abortion, and it was a lot. Him, having to deal with her feelings towards him and him being married, and he was a pretty misogynist, right? Like, and that we'll get to the truth of what he was as a person. Like, I know we don't like to talk about people post death, but let's be honest. Like, he would be in there, there were some groupies sitting in the back, and some groupies sitting there. And the reason why people always ask me on that song why we left Never a Flaw.
Never a Flaw.
Remember that his voice never.
Yeah, of course.
We left that there because she was in the booth. He's sitting back there on the couch at the Hit Factory, and he has some girl sitting with him, and she's trying to record, but she's so taken by the fact
she's staring at that through the glass. Yeah,
like, you're parading this girl in front of my face. It's not like it was fate, right? It was some random groupie girl, and she couldn't record, and it caused a huge argument between them. And so I left that part as a reminder to both of them, that because she kept repeating, never a flaw, never a flaw, never a flaw. Because that's what he put there for her to repeat. But she couldn't get to the verse.
Wow.
So I left that piece in there as a snicker to both of them.
Wow.
What it took to make that one record that she kept repeating, because she couldn't repeat his voice. Because she was so taken back by what she saw in the control room that he just was sitting there flirting with this girl.
Thanks for listening to part 1 of our conversation with special guest Jacob York. Stay tuned for part 2.
You can catch Mixed and Mastered on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hit that follow button, leave a review, and tell a friend. I'm your host, Jeffrey Sledge. Mixed and Mastered is produced and distributed by Merrick Studios.